Prof Mimi.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. So we ask Allah to grant barakah into our session, inshallah. Okay. So first of all, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to this session. Okay, where I'm going to speak about chapter 1, that is also known as introduction chapter for our research or for our study. Okay, and just now I see in the message, okay, there's a Prof Faizan from Florida. Hello, Prof. And a few faces that I know here, Izyanti, Dr. Izyanti from Sabah, and I have my PhD student, those in pipeline, okay, Mr. Ridwan, and I have here Surya Ayu, okay, and some of my master students are also here, so welcome everyone. All right. Okay, although this chapter that we call chapter 1 is the first chapter for our thesis or for our research or what for our proposal, for example. But then, okay, I believe that if we have a good understanding of this chapter, okay, we will surely have the rest of our chapter, or we said that it will surely ease your step to each chapter. Okay, so what we said about having a right beginning, okay, or a correct start is necessary to ensure a pleasant journey of our research work. All right. Okay, can you see my slide? Okay. A bit of introduction about myself. My name is Salamia. They call me Mimi, and I belong to hotel department in Faculty of Hotel and Tourism Management, UITM. Okay, I have graduated in my PhD, having a doctorate degree in 2011. So for this past 10 years, okay, I have produced a few. I have duplicated a few doctorate myself, and also there will be several more in the pipeline. I must say that I'm excited to share with all of you here, since earlier I was told that my audience majority are those researchers or students who are at the early stage, okay, early stage of your research journey, okay, or your master degree or PhD degree journey. So I believe that a majority of you are still fresh, okay, and I believe that you have read a lot of literature, you are overwhelmed with information, with knowledge, okay. So it is a matter of putting everything you know into place, inshallah. And if you I also have divided to make things easy, okay, for you to understand. I have divided this sharing into 3 different parts, which is part 1 is overview on chapter 1, okay, meaning we are going to look at chapter 1 or so-called introduction chapter, and then next we are going to zoom into background of study, which is the subsection in introduction chapter. Okay, and finally in part 3, I would like to review on the problem statement. Okay, so 3 parts altogether. Okay, if you look at my first slide, I wrote here, okay, I wrote here a guide on how to write chapter 1. Meaning to say that this is what I'm going to share is not the only way or the only method, okay, to write your chapter. And this is not the best method as well, but what I would like to claim is that this is one of the many ways that we have in approaching our chapter 1, our problem statement, our background of study, okay, one of many ways. And the only thing that I can claim is that this one way is a proven method. Okay, so let's celebrate differences, difference of school of thoughts that we have. Okay, all right, and then I would like to start with chapter 1. Okay, what is chapter 1? So basically, in explaining on what is chapter 1, I have divided into 3 questions. So we're going to answer the question of what, why, and how. So by the time we finish answering these 3 questions, so inshallah, we are already complete our chapter 1. Okay, so the first part is what? Okay, what is chapter 1? So basically, when we talk about thesis in general, okay, either it's a master thesis or PhD thesis, okay, the basic chapters that we have, or we said the base model or the basic model is that we have 5 chapters. We have chapter 1 known as introduction chapter. Okay, we have chapter 2 literature review, chapter 3 research methodology, and then we have chapter 4 analysis, and finally chapter 5 for findings and conclusion and recommendation. So that's what we call a base model. Okay, like if we look at a car, okay, there's 2 types. We have a base model where we only have basic features, and then we also have top model that fully loaded with accessories. So when you see 5 chapters, so this is the basic model, okay, of your thesis. So we can submit a basic model, okay, the 5 chapters is okay, no problem. But some of us, they might want to add the chapter. So that's why you can see that for those theses who are that is lengthy, okay, they actually expand the chapters. So sometimes the literature chapter, they can have 2 chapters in the for the literature, one on the discussing on the setting, okay, one discussing on the theoretical part, so become 6 chapters. And then some divide they expand the analysis chapter, okay, become 2 chapters, like they want to have quantitative and qualitative, for example, for those mixed method studies. And then even the end chapter, some also expand, like they have findings in different chapter, and then they go on to recommendation, conclusion, future research suggestion in another chapter. And some even extend to, like they have several jilid, several what we call that, several volume. Okay, some go to the extent that they have more than volume of the thesis. So it is actually up to the candidate, okay, whether you want to stick with the basic model, okay, or you want to go expand your thesis into a extended model. Okay. Okay, back to chapter 1, that is known as introduction chapter. So when we say introduction, okay, it is very important, although it is only introduction. Okay, it is important. Like let's imagine if we go into an interview, for example, okay, to get a scholarship or to get a top post in a company. During the interview, okay, imagine that the interviewer ask you to introduce yourself. So it is like one-time opportunity. Okay, you will try your very best to make sure that they know you, and then they like you from the very beginning. So it is first impression. During that opportunity, everybody will try to do well, okay. And if we are good, I mean, if we are doing good, okay, during this introduction or interview, introduce yourself, okay, then the rest of the question during that interview will just become a formality, right? So this is what happened in your thesis as well, or for those who are writing their proposal. Treat your introduction chapter or chapter 1, okay, like you like the one and only opportunity to actually introduce your research, okay. And then it is important that when you do your introduction, okay, make sure that you write it clearly, okay, because this is a platform where your reader or your examiner, okay, they read it, they are being introduced to your study for the first time, okay. And if you miss this opportunity, okay, you will be scrutinized for the rest of your chapter, okay. But then on the other hand, imagine, okay, if you strike here in the chapter 1, so they will, your examiner or your reader will imagine that they love your story, and then they understand what you're doing, okay. They can easily visualize your research. So the rest of your chapter, okay, is going to be a pleasant journey for you, right? And then when I say clear, it is important also to note that, okay, when you write your chapter, make sure that you really, as a researcher or as a writer, you really know what you are writing, okay. You should know the flow. It should go from general to specific, and then make sure that you are consistency in using all the terms, okay. Consistency in terms of the spelling, consistency in terms of the citing format, okay, referencing format as well. So this is what I mean by clear. And then your chapter 1 also must be complete. Complete means this is the place or a platform where we introduce everything, okay, about our work or about our research. And when we say complete, it is not that you put everything in. So sometimes like we have no idea whether this is a literature chapter or introduction chapter. So you should be able to draw a line between giving in depth, okay, and complete information. Okay, stay on the surface. Okay, what I mean here, stay on the surface means for introduction chapter, okay, when you need to deliver everything, okay, for it to be complete, for the reader or the examiner to understand everything from this chapter. But then stay on the surface means you are not going to go into so deep like the literature, or when you speak about the objective like in methodology, okay. All right. Okay, so that's what chapter 1 is. Okay, and then next is that why is it important? Okay, chapter, as I said just now, chapter 1 is important because it sets the scene. Okay, in other words, we as a student or as a researcher, we are giving overview of our work. So it's like everything is in here, and then again it is first impression. Okay, the funny part about first impression. Okay, the psychology of the first impression is very interesting. There's a research done, okay, and the finding said that it only takes the duration of an eye blink to size up another person in terms of attractiveness, in terms of trustworthy. Okay, so this is the same thing goes to your thesis. So we as an examiner, it takes us actually a few minutes to scan through your chapter 1. Okay, and then after we finish scanning, over the next few minutes, we will form a sort of like a complete conclusion about the research. Okay, so chapter 1 is like, it's very important because it's like a filter to snap judgment, okay, on the whole thesis or the whole proposal. So it is not, although the judgment is not necessarily accurate, okay, but then you have to remember it endures. Okay, it endures, meaning to say that if someone have, or the examiner have a negative judgment, for example, so it's going to be difficult for he or she to actually shift the opinion later on. Okay, so that's the psychology of first impression. So that's why we have to be very careful in our chapter 1. All right. Okay, chapter 1 also important because, okay, this is the place where we researcher justify the need of our study. Okay, meaning to say this is the place where we construct our problem statement, where we explain, okay, why this study is important. Okay, why we need this study. Okay. Okay, next we are going to move into how. Okay, so you already know what's chapter 1, and then why is it important. Okay, so the last question is how are we going to complete our chapter 1. So basically, this is again the seven subsections. Okay, and I must say that this 7 subsection is actually basic subsection that we have. Some will expand it. Okay, some will put a theoretical framework inside here. Okay, and some will extend this section as well. And the first 2, background of study and problem statement, okay, I will go into a bit detail later. Then we have research objective. Okay, research objectives. So when we speak about research objectives, it is actually what do you want to do? What in your research, or what are the things that you want to achieve in the research? I think I put down here a snapshot or a specimen of research objective. Okay, how people write research objectives. So for example here, objective 1, to identify the factors that led to the development of hiking in Malaysia and its steady establishment as a nature-based adventure activity. So the word to identify the factors is the objective of your research, okay, of a research. And then another example of objectives is to explore the benefits of hiking tourism. And then third objective, to predict the future transformation of this sector, especially during the pandemic. So these are example of how we can write objectives. So it depends on the type of your research. Okay, if you were doing a secondary data only, so you have to construct different objective. If you are doing an exploratory study, it's going to be constructed different way. Same goes to correlational study as well as causal study. Okay, and okay, this one is another sample. Okay, to disclose the direct effect of guest perceived value with guest satisfaction. So one example of research objective, to examine the role of co-creation as a moderating variable in guest perceived value satisfaction relationship in P2P accommodation. So these are all samples that I extract from the publication of my PhD student. Okay, so these are some of the recent ones. So these are example of objective. I think it's easy. And then we go back to, okay, in subsection 1.3, we can have conceptual framework. Most theses put conceptual framework in chapter 1, and there are also some who include theoretical framework here. Otherwise, you can discuss, because theoretical framework is something that is general, where we explain in detail all the underpinning theories. So some of us might want to shift theoretical framework in a literature section. So that's why if you want to remain basic, you should have only conceptual framework here. Okay, so an example of conceptual framework, okay, like this. Okay, this is an example. I think quite a number of people, or quite a number of students still like struggling between the difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Okay, theoretical framework is the existing framework where we explain or describe our nature of variables or our nature of work using existing theory. So we have a borrowed theory, so that's theoretical framework. Like for example, if you are in consumer behavior, so maybe you want to explain that your work can be explained through TRA theory, for example, or means and theory. Okay, so that's theoretical framework. But then conceptual framework is where you conceptualize your study. So conceptual framework is when we, as a researcher, we actually come up with this one. Of course, we adapt from someone else's model, but then this is something that we construct, okay, and maybe we want to adapt from one study or adapt from several studies, or we want to add variables, or we want to add dimensions. So this is the place, conceptual framework, because it explains, okay, what are the elements that you want to touch in your research, okay, in your study. This is an example, conceptual framework for mountain tourism. So at a proposal stage, usually conceptual framework we will write as a proposed conceptual framework, because at the proposal stage, okay, these are the framework that you would like to propose for your study. Okay? But never for theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is like borrowed theories, and you explain how your framework being backed up or explained by the existing theory. Okay? This is an example of, I think, a simple framework where this study would like to look at the how mountain tourism management manage the supply side and manage the demand side. So it can be something like this, okay? And another example of conceptual framework, it can also look something like this, okay, where we have independent variable, okay, we have mediating, moderating, and dependent variable. So when are we going to have which kind of framework? I mean, like, when are we going to, which framework do you need, for example, or which framework should you construct for your study? So the answer will be we have to go back to your problem statement. Okay, what's the gap that you want to fill up, and then go back to your research objective. Okay, then you will know which type of framework are you going to work on. For example, if you this type of framework, the one that you were I'm showing here. Okay, this one is when you have objective of testing relationship. Okay, when one of the objective or some of your objectives of the study is to test a relationship between variables. Okay, the one that you plot in, like for example, between learning orientation and performance. For example, you want to test the relationship whether there is a relationship or whether there is a positive relationship, or you want to look at the effect or the level of the relationship. So this is the type of conceptual framework that you can come up with. Okay, so you can have the relationship being drawn between variables, and you can also plot in the hypothesis. Okay, so that's why if you go back to this one, okay, what we have here in chapter 1, after you write on your conceptual framework, then you can have your research hypothesis. So I put it in a different font because some studies, okay, might not have hypothesis. So research hypothesis is a statement that explain the relationship between variables. So like that's why, okay, if your objective of your study does not test any relationship, so therefore you're not going to have hypothesis. So that's why it is like optional, where some will have it, some will not have it. Okay. I think I have an example or specimen of hypothesis. Oh, okay, here. Okay, this is how people write hypothesis. I mean, the example of hypothesis. Some sample. Okay, like the first one I read for you. Perceived value has significantly relationship towards satisfaction. Okay, and then you can also write something like guess perceived value attributes influence guess satisfaction. So how you write your hypothesis is actually you have to go back to your literature. Okay, it is not like you construct it on your own. You have to look into your literature and then adapt from what's have been tested before. So maybe this one you want to extend to another setting, or you want to extend to another variable, or testing at different level. Like for example, previous scholars test it as independent. So in your study, you want to test it as moderating, for example. So the hypothesis will be based on your objective of your study, okay? The objective of your study. All right. Okay, next what we have here. Okay, then after hypothesis, we will have significance of study. So you can put down the theoretical significance as well as practical significance. And then we have scope of study. Okay. Scope of study is when it's important because this is where researcher define boundaries of your study. Okay, what I mean by boundaries is that this is the place where you really put down what do you cover in your study, what are the elements that you cover, what are the variables that you cover, okay, and then in terms of geographical area, in terms of, for example, population, in terms of theory. So this section, scope of study, is a section that safeguard a researcher, safeguard the students, safeguard us lah. That's how I look at it. Meaning to say, like for example, if you have written nicely your scope of study, then there's a question like, for example, okay, let's say, for example, the population of your research is domestic tourists. Okay, so if you have a question from the examiner or from the panel asking about why you are not looking into international rival, for example. So this is the answer. Okay, it's in the scope of your study. So you are not looking into others except for domestic tourists is because okay, that's the boundaries, that's the scope that you have come up with in your study. Okay, so same goes to other things, other elements like geography, theoretical, even the methodology. Okay, sometimes you have questions like why you use a quantitative method, why not use qualitative method. So this is where you explain. Okay, and then finally we can have a definition of terms. Definition of terms, we're not going to like list all of the terms here. Okay, we only pick up the important terms, or what we said, the main keywords of the study should be here. Okay, the keywords, like for example, when you publish a paper, you have abstract and then you have keywords there. Okay, so keywords mean the important terms that you cannot miss. So this is where you define them. Okay. Okay, so we actually finish on the overview of chapter 1.